All right, high rollers, are you heading to the World Series of Poker this summer? Poker players far and wide busy making their plans, trying to figure out what events they're playing, booking flights. It's not far away now, and we're going to talk about it today. Our guest is one of the most well-known members of the poker media. She's worked at Pocket Fives, moved over to Bluff Magazine where she was managing editor, worked at the World Poker Tour, Poker Road Radio, one of my favorites. She was also the managing editor of WSOP.com. She did those pre-final table live stream segments with Nolan Dalla, and to me it seemed like she was having fun all the way along. Oh, and she's also worked at pregame.com, the world's largest sports betting media company. Jessica Welman's with us. Jessica, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, am I right about your time at the World Series of Poker? I watched those broadcasts. You were on right before Tuckman at WSOP.com, and it seemed like you guys were just having a hell of a time.
It was a lot of fun. The World Series is a circus in the best and worst way possible. Sometimes you get caught up in the long days and the craziness, and it overwhelms you a little, but it's such a cool experience, and I think every time I go, I do have those moments where I'm like, it's kind of ridiculous that this is my job.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it's the same for the media. I mean, the players are playing, the media is there working. Long days for the people that don't go and do those long days. What's it like? It must be just hard sometimes.
You get in a groove about it, I think. You know, when I was full-time with the World Series of Poker, it was like 3 days off the summer, if even. What people don't realize is, at least at this time we were still starting at noon, like Jack Effel, Seth Polanski, Ty Stewart, and a bunch of the operations people meet every day at 10 or 11 in the morning. So that's when our day starts, and most of the time I would be leaving around 10 p.m., 11 p.m.
And this goes on for like almost 2 months.
Yeah, it's about 65 days. I think, my last year there, I did the New Orleans circuit into the national championship into the World Series, and it was 80 days in a row or something.
Well, it can definitely be daunting, and it seems like each year they're adding more events here and there, new events each year. Do you see a point where the World Series of Poker is 2 months long with 100 events?
I don't see that happening anytime soon unless there's a change in management. Ty Stewart is very, very smart and good he's the director of the WSOP, for those who don't know. He loves these weekend marquee events. This year having a big marquee event every weekend had been a goal of his for several years. But he has a lot of reverence and respect for the bracelet. So whenever they make these expansion decisions, like 3 online bracelets, expanding to over 60 events, it's done with weighted concern for the integrity of the bracelet and making sure they're servicing their audience. That I have a feeling 75 is probably about where they'll cap out and just realize too much beyond that, you do run the risk of kind of devaluing what a bracelet's worth.
With the 3 online bracelets, your thoughts, because I'm wondering, is this more of a poker decision or is this more of a branding decision where the World Series of Poker wants to increase their brand online?
I think, and let me do the legal clarification here, I am no longer an employee of the World Series. I contract with them, so what I'm saying is purely conjecture, not anything I've heard from the inside, but when you look at things, what really is making the money in World Series of Poker as a company right now is online poker in New Jersey more so than Nevada. But just growing that Nevada online poker scene is an important part of the WSOP now. I think some people are raising some eyebrows at 3 bracelet events that are online, but in order to make online poker more relevant, more prevalent, especially now that we have like Pennsylvania and New York very seriously in the conversation, is an important part of growing poker that may seem counterintuitive when you look at the schedule, but when you think about the bigger picture of making online poker happen and growing the game, because that's really the only way we're going to grow it nationally, I think that's why those decisions were made.
You talk about the legitimacy of a bracelet. If there's 3 online and the World Series of Poker being the biggest deal in the industry, that's got to help the online movement.
I mean, Nevada, it's hard. There's not as much liquidity as there is in New Jersey, meaning there are just not that many people on the site. But in the summer, traffic just goes to a different level because all these people are there all day. And they have a lot of events that if people bust, they can hop online and get a lot of value out of it. So I think just legitimizing it, especially to people who aren't online poker fans or don't know much about it. My friends tend to ask me, is it safe? Is there cheating? What's with the regulations? And seeing a company like WSOP put it front and center, I think does alleviate some of the concerns about, if it's on the up and up.
Absolutely. Well, I've been reading some of your articles of late on sites like uspoker.com and playnevada.com, articles about the World Series of Poker. The schedule's been out for a while now, and it's very exciting. As you mentioned, each weekend seems to have this marquee event where it's going to attract a lot of people, starting with the Colossus right through the main event.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart schedule in terms of those marquee events, just making sure every weekend there's an event so that if you can only make it one weekend of the series, it's not like if you can't go Colossus weekend, there's not going to be a Million Year Maker weekend or a Deep Stack weekend. If you can find a weekend, with the exception of the seniors weekend, if you're not old enough, there's going to be a ton of value making the trip out to Vegas. And I think for a recreational player, having that flexibility of a schedule is huge.
Everyone talks about that seniors weekend being one of the most fun weekends of the year. Is it the same for you when you're covering it? Are these people just out there for the love of the game?
Yes, it's so much fun. People bag on it, but I love how excited everyone is. Last year, I was working on the WSOP team for live updates, and it is a field where you don't necessarily have a bunch of people that you can cover just walking around knowing who they are. So we sent the call out on Twitter of, hey, anybody have dads playing, relatives playing? And it's great to see somebody like Eric Seidel chiming in and saying, hey, my brother's playing, be sure to cover my brother, or Jeff Gross and his dad. Just seeing poker players be enthusiastic about other people playing because they're a bit jaded, may not be the fairest word, but it's just another day at the office for them. But even them watching their family take part is exciting.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I saw the tag team event last year, I was like, what? And then I saw Jonathan.
Oh, it's great.
I saw Jonathan Little with his mom and dad running deep, almost got the bracelet. I thought, hey, you know what? This is a pretty good idea.
It's really fun. My favorite tag team, I'm biased because they're my friends, Eric Baldwin and Justin Young, came in with like a full cooler of beer, just ready to have like a fun day. Curious how that dynamic's going to translate to the high buy-in tag team event, which they've added this year. I doubt Jonathan Little is going to put his parents in a $10,000 poker tournament, but I do think people like Eric and Justin, or Doug Polk and Ryan Fee, who won last year, there will be, some competitive fun to it with money on the line. It almost reminds me of, if you guys remember, the Caesars Cup, which is, they used to do this in tandem with the World Series. They would have, at World Series of Poker Europe, Team Europe and Team USA, kind of like the Ryder Cup. We did it at APAC, Team Europe, Team Asia Pacific, Team USA, playing in different formats of poker against one another. And the pros really enjoyed it, but with nothing on the line. Poker's never as fun with nothing on the line.
Right. I mean, that's what poker's about.
So I think it'll be kind of the same vibe as that, but with higher stakes.
I've been lucky enough to play the Colossus. I played it the first year it happened, and I couldn't believe the crowds. This year, 6 flights, I believe, with a re-entry, 12 entries you could have. I mean, it's so crazy, a field that size, right? So much has got to happen and go right for you to get down to that final table.
It is very difficult. It's a very long tournament. I played Colossus the first year myself, and I had a blast. I was at a table with Blair Hinkle, and I'm just like, when am I ever playing poker with Blair Hinkle? And I think for the experience, I think people cringed at the $500 buy-in, seeing it lower like that. We have a $300 buy-in this year for the first time, but it's running Fridays throughout the World Series that I think once you have 20,000 people taking part in something, the prize pool becomes big enough that the lower buy-in, I don't think, really decreases the merit of that bracelet. Those people who win Colossus earned it. That's a lot of poker.
Absolutely. Are you amazed by how smoothly the WSOP seems to run every year? I mean, there's little hiccups here and there, long bathroom lineups, that sort of thing. But I mean, in terms of the play and the lineup and the schedule and all those players, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yes, but at the same time, having been on the inside and seeing how this process goes, it doesn't surprise me because of the people involved. What people may not know, and they get grumpy sometimes, the schedule was out very early this year. It's usually like mid to late February. They have to go through 7, 8 drafts of the schedule before they finalize it. They're running it through the restaurants, the operations team at the Rio, through players getting their advice, through Jack and his tournament directors, and they're getting every type of advice possible. And then you'll have people like DJ McKinnon on Twitter makes excellent points about structures and schedules all the time. But certain things, like, guys don't necessarily realize some concessions are made for reasons they may not think about, like restarts being at a certain time and when things go, when the monster stacks go, because it's how many tables are available, how many dealers are available. And that's something that I think players don't necessarily think about. But once you see that every single thing like that is taken into consideration, it doesn't surprise me that it runs relatively smoothly. Like, there are still hiccups, sure, but I think that's to be expected with anything of that size.
How will the credit card situation affect it this year? You think it'll help big time or cause confusion?
I think it will help. It's just a question of how much it's going to help. I don't know if we're going to have an onslaught of people show up. I think it's nice. Like, for me, I like getting points on my credit card. If I play an event, I'm probably going to do a credit card buy-in just to get some Delta miles out of it or something. But I think it's nice, especially for amateurs like myself. I know I don't, and this may not be something people necessarily think of, I don't like carrying cash on me. That buying into a ladies event for $1,000 stresses me out, having $1,000 on my person. That I think for some people that maybe like carrying around large amounts of cash or having to have a bunch of cash at the same time, that were barriers to taking part in as much as they want, is going to be helped by the credit cards.
I see recently that Kate Hall made some headlines for the Female Player of the Year. She says she doesn't really think there should be a Female Player of the Year. You talked about the ladies event there, one of the most fun events every year at the World Series of Poker. But I know the field sizes being so large are still dominated by men, 5 to 10% women, I believe the number is.
That's very high.
Okay, so that's a high number. So what's the state of women in poker? What do we need to do to attract more of them to the World Series of Poker every summer?
If we had answered this question, I think we'd see the numbers go up. I talk with my female friends. I have my own thoughts. I always say, like, just a welcoming environment. A casino, getting into, like, women's studies here, so apologies in advance. Like, as a woman in the United States, you're generally brought up to avoid certain situations, being, like, on an unlit street at night. And casinos fairly or unfairly get grouped into that. Like, don't lurk around casinos by yourself. And so when I first started playing at riverboat casinos in Indiana, I found just being on the property, I was very nervous. Going to the parking lot, I was very nervous. And as I played more, I realized, like, now that I live in Vegas, sometimes if I want to exercise, like, I'll go take a long walk on the strip through casinos because I know cameras are everywhere. It's probably the safest place in Vegas for me to go. I think just getting women more acclimated to the idea that poker is a safe, sanitary, fun thing to do, like it is at home with your friends, and this step to the casino isn't as scary as it may seem, is one way to address it, I think.
Is there an analogy there with how you came to poker? Because I read that you were an aspiring Hollywood mogul turned aspiring academic. You found poker and it scooped you right up, right? Once you find the game, you kind of fall in love with it.
I think so. I mean, I love people watching. I love people, characters, stories. So poker was great for me because the kinds of people you encounter in poker, you never really run out of something new and surprising. Every event I go to, something happens that I've never seen before. So as someone who wanted to make movies and tell stories, here are so many great stories that need to be told.
The reason I asked you for this interview was about your article on the Nevada marijuana laws. That's another change this year. What does that mean for poker players? Because let's be honest, a large number of them do like to partake and, they sneak outside on the breaks. Is that going to be troublesome for them this year?
I think people might be jumping the gun a little on marijuana laws. For those not familiar, last year, via voter referendum, Nevada decided to legalize recreational marijuana use. Meaning, if you're found with up to 1/8 of an ounce of marijuana on you, you can no longer be arrested for possession, which is all well and good, and that law is in effect now. But there are still currently no operating marijuana dispensaries within the state. So if you happen to come to the World Series of Poker and you happen to possess up to 1/8 of an ounce of marijuana, you really can't admit where it came from without running some criminal risk. You cannot bring in marijuana across state lines. You cannot buy medical marijuana from someone else. And most importantly, for those at the World Series of Poker, the Nevada Gaming Commission has expressed very clearly to all the casinos that this law may happen and exist in Nevada, but it cannot exist on the properties. Nevada gaming regulations are no laughing matter, so obviously not on the casino floor. If you have weed in your room at the Rio on break and you get caught with it, you will get kicked off the property and probably 86'd. You know, it's still that big a deal to casinos, and their licenses are on the line, so they're going to continue to treat it the same way they did before.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard stories of guys sneaking out on the break with the chip lead. They get caught and they get kicked right out of the tournament. Listen, we've had you long enough here, Jessica. Don't want to take too much of your time, but I do like to check our guest's Twitter bio. You've got an interesting one. It says coffee addict, classic movie fanatic, defensively pessimistic, raging carnivore, old soul, and picker of nits, which brings me to culturalnitpickery.com.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. I don't get the personal website plug very often.
Can you tell me about this site? Because you do a lot of writing, don't you?
I like writing. Writing about poker is great. It pays the bills. But that site is a mix of personal narratives about myself, you know, warning if you go there. A lot of it is about the fact my mom passed away a year ago. My father passed away when I was a kid. So a lot of them are just kind of semi-humorous, semi-sad essays about my own experiences with cancer and grief. And then the other half is picking nits on movies, television, just as an aspiring Hollywood mogul, I still have a love for pop culture that is the space where I write about that.
Well, I can really tell because I was surprised when I went down your Twitter feed that most of the posts are about that.
Oscars, yeah, you caught me on Oscar night. Big Twitter volume for me.
And by the way, real quick, what's your schedule like at the World Series of Poker this year?
To be determined. I have not finalized my position for the summer. Hate to be vague about it. I just am not 100% yet, so I don't want to say anything one way or another.
All right. Well, listen, we wish you luck this summer. Jessica Welman, much appreciated. Thank you for your time today. And if you're out at the Rio this summer, good luck, okay?
All right. Thanks so much.